Hey boys, since I don't get to spend any time with you during this COVID-19 thing, I figured I could at least read you a book and you guys can watch it on YouTube. So the first book I picked out is called The Great Brain. It was one of the first series that I ever read as a kid, and I enjoyed it, and I hope you guys like it too. So here's the start of it. I need my glasses. Even on my Kindle, I can't see. Yeah, it's embarrassing. Okay. Most everyone in Utah remembers 1896 as the year the territory became a state. But in Adamville, it was celebrated by all the kids in town and by Papa and Mamas as the time of the Great Brains Reformation. I was 7 years old, going on 8. Tom was 10. And my older brother, Swen, well, would soon be 12. We were all born and raised in Adamville, which was a typical Utah town with big wide streets lined with trees that had been planted by the early Mormons, pioneers. Adamville had a population of 2,500 people, of which about 2,000 were Mormons and the rest Catholics and Protestants. Mormons and non-Mormons had learned to live together with some degree of tolerance and understanding by that time. But tolerance hadn't come easy for my oldest brother, Swen. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know. Sweyn? Whatever. My brother Tom and myself. Most of our playmates were Mormon kids, but we taught them tolerance. It was just a question of us learning how to fight good enough for Swen to whip every Mormon kid his age, Tom to whip every Mormon kid his age, and for me to whip every Mormon kid my age in town. After all, there is nothing as tolerant and understanding as a kid you can whoop. We never had any really cold weather or snow in Adamville because it was situated in the southwestern part of Utah, known to the Mormons as Dixie, due to its mild climate. This was fortunate since we didn't have indoor toilets then. Everybody in town, from Calvin Whitlock, the banker, down, had to use a back house until the water closet Papa ordered arrived from Sears Roebuck. We called them back houses and not outhouses because in Utah an outhouse was a sort of tool shed and storage room. Back houses ran from 2-holers to 6-holers. Ours was a standard 4-holer. You could just about judge a family's station in life by their back house. Just by looking at the Whitlock back house with its ornate scroll woodwork trim and its fancy vent, you knew Calvin Whitlock was a person of means and influence in the community. If there was one man in all of Adamville who would order the first water closet ever seen in town, that man had to be Papa. I thought Papa was the greatest man in the world except for one weakness. Papa just couldn't resist ordering any new invention that he saw advertised in magazines or catalogs. Our big attic was filled with crazy inventions that didn't work. Papa was always threatening to write to the presidents of those companies and announce them as swindlers, but he never did. I guess he was afraid they would write back and call him a fool for believing what they said in their advertisements. Papa was editor and publisher of the Adamville Weekly Advocate. You would think a man smart enough to be an editor and publisher would be smart enough not to let himself be swindled. But Papa kept right on ordering new inventions. It was no surprise to anybody in town when they learned Papa had ordered the first water closet most people had ever seen. The first Tom and I knew of it was the morning Fred Harvey walked into our backyard with a pick and a shovel on his shoulder. He was the only plumber in town. He was a middle-aged man with a face that looked as if he had taken a bite out of a sour pickle. He was known as a very cranky person who didn't like kids. Mama said the reason Mr. Harvey didn't like kids was because he had never had to put up with any of his own. Didn't sound quite right to me, but that is what Mama said. When Mr. Harvey came into our backyard, Tom and I were on our big back porch, which ran the width of our house. We were beating with sticks on Mama's washtubs, pretending that we were drummers in a band. Tom had a grin on his freckled face as he banged away. He was the only one in our family who had freckles. Tom didn't look like Papa and he didn't look like Mama, unless you put them together. Then you could see that his hair was a cross between Papa's dark hair and Mama's blonde hair, and that he had Papa's nose and mouth and Mama's stubborn chin. Where the freckles came from was a mystery. I took after Papa, and had curly black hair and dark eyes. My older brother, Sven, took after the Danish grandfather for whom he was named. He had blonde hair and a stubborn Danish chin. Tom and I heard the clanking sound of the pick and shovel being dropped to the ground by Mr. Harvey over the sound of our beatings on the washtubs. We stopped and turned around to watch. Mr. Harvey pulled a bandana, a handkerchief from his overalls pocket, and blew his nose loudly. Then he looked at us as if he resented us being on our own back porch. "Why aren't you kids in school?" he demanded. "Because there isn't any school today," Tom said, glaring right back at Mr. Harvey. "And there might not be any school for a whole week." "And why not?" Mr. Harvey asked. "Because Miss Thatcher is sick," Tom answered. Mr. Harvey certainly knew that Miss Thatcher taught the first through the sixth grades in our one-room schoolhouse. He also knew that when she was sick, there wasn't any school for any kid in town. I guess this kind of upset him. "If I'd have known that," he said as if angry, "I wouldn't have taken this job." Tom and I watched Mr. Harvey start to dig a hole in our backyard. "What is he doing?" I asked, just as curious as I could be. "Let's find out," Tom said. We left the porch and approached Mr. Harvey. "Why are you digging a hole?" Tom asked, polite as all get out. "To bury nosy little boys in," Mr. Harvey said gruffly. "Now get away from me and leave me to my work." "Come on, J.D., Tom said, heading back for the porch. "We'll ask Mama." My brothers and I always called each other by our initials because that was the way Papa addressed us. We all had the same middle initial because we all had the same middle name of Dennis, just like Papa. More than 200 years before I was born, an ancestor of ours named Dennis betrayed 6 of his cousins to the English during a rebellion in County Meath, Ireland. His father decrees that all male Fitzgerald must bear the middle name of Dennis to remind them of the cowardice of his son. I followed Tom into our big kitchen with its 10-foot wide coal-burning range. Mama was kneading dough on the big kitchen table as we entered. I had never seen Mama's hands idle. They were busy hands, sewing, mending, cooking, washing, knitting, and always moving. Mama's blonde hair was piled high in braids on her head. The sunshine coming through the kitchen window and striking Mama's head made her hair look like golden sunlight. She looked at us and smiled. "What have you 2 boys on your minds?" she asked. "Why is Mr. Harvey digging a hole in our backyard?" Tom asked. "It is the cesspool for the water closet your father ordered from Sears Roebuck," Mama answered. Aunt Bertha, who lived with us since the death of her husband, was greasing a bread pan with bacon rounds. She wasn't really our aunt, but we called her Aunt Bertha because she was just like one of the family. "This water closet business is the most foolish thing your husband ever did," she said to Mama. When Aunt Bertha criticized Papa, he was always Mama's husband. When Papa did something Aunt Bertha approved of, he became that man of ours. She was a big woman with hands and feet like a man's and gray hair she always wore in a bun at the nape of her neck. Tom scratched his freckled nose as wrinkles appeared on his high forehead. "You put china in a china closet," he said slowly. "You put clothes in a clothes closet. You put linen in a linen closet. But how can you put water in a water closet?" I was dumbfounded. It was the first time in my life I'd ever heard my brother with this great brain admit he didn't know everything. Every year when Papa renewed his subscription to the New York World, they sent him the World Almanac. While Sven and I read books like Black Beauty and Huckleberry Finn, Tom read the World Almanac and the set of encyclopedias in our bookcase. Tom said his great brain had to know everything. "A water closet is a toilet you have inside your house," Mom explained. "That is why your father had Mr. Jameson partition off the room and the bathroom. The hole Mr. Harvey is digging is the cesspool for the new water closet." "But Mama," I protested, thinking about the odor coming from our back house, especially on hot days. "It will stink up the whole house." Aunt Bertha agreed with me. "I tell you, Tina," she said to Mama, This is going to make us the laughing stock of Adamville. Now, Bertha, Mama said with a soft rebuke, I've seen water closets in hotels in Salt Lake City and in Denver while on my honeymoon. I assure you they are very convenient and sanitary. I remember how couldn't believe you could get water without a pump until they built the Adamville Reservoir, and Papa had explained how the reservoir being on higher ground forced the water through the pipes. And when Mr. Harvey had installed our hot water heater, we got hot water right out of tap. I thought it was a miracle. But a back house in our bathroom was beyond my wildest imagination. I was positive that Papa had been swindled again on another crazy invention. Tom and I went back outside to the porch. We watched as Mr. Harvey continued to dig the cesspool. In a little while, Sammy Leeds, Danny Forrester, and Andy Anderson came into our backyard. Mr. Harvey chased them away and told them to stay out of the backyard while he was working. Tom and I sat on the back porch, watching until lunchtime. Papa came home for lunch with Swen, who had been helping at the newspaper office. Mr. Harvey came to our back door. He demanded that Papa keep all kids out of the backyard while he was working. Papa told Swen to remain at home to see that this was done. Can we watch from the back porch? Tom asked. Yes, Papa agreed, but stay out of the yard. I could tell from the conniving look on Tom's face during lunch that his great brain was working like 60 to turn this to his financial advantage. He disappeared right after lunch. I went out to the back porch with Swen. Mr. Harvey had just finished eating his own lunch, which he had brought in a shoebox. He went to the hydrant and got a drink of water and then went to work. Mom had asked him to have lunch with us, but Mr. Harvey had refused. Swen and I sat on the railing of the back porch watching. Think you'll have any fights keeping the kids out of the backyard? I asked hopefully. There's nobody left to fight, Swen said as if he regretted it. Maybe when Papa and Mama send you to Salt Lake City to school next fall, you'll find some kids up there to fight, I said, wanting to cheer him up. He shook his head sadly. It's a Catholic academy, J.D., and I don't believe the sisters or priests who teach there will allow any fighting. I thought ahead to the time when I would be graduating from the 6th grade in Adamville like Swen would in June of that year. I too would be sent to school in Salt Lake City. The thought scared me and made my mouth dry. I went into the kitchen to get a drink of water. Just as the door leading to our side porch was thrust open, I stared bug-eyed as I watched Tom come through the hallway that separated our kitchen and dining room, followed by 10 kids. It is all right, Mama, Tom said if he had led 10 kids into our kitchen every day. Papa ordered Swen to keep the kids out of the backyard while Mr. Harvey is digging. But Papa said it was all right to watch from the porch. We can't get to the back porch without going into the backyard unless we go through the kitchen. Aunt Bertha shook her head. I tell you, Tina, that boy could talk his way around anything. He gets it from his father, Mama said, if she was proud of Tom instead of angry with him for marching 10 kids across the clean kitchen floor. I couldn't believe my eyes as I watched Mama go into the pantry and turn with a big crock jar filled with cookies. She stationed herself near the door leading to the back porch. All right, boys, she said, smiling. Help yourselves to an oatmeal cookie as you pass by. I had to fall in line last to get one of my own mother's cookies. Tom was munching on his cookies. I joined him on the back porch. You know, J.D., he said as he finished the last bite of his cookie and folded his arms on his chest, there's room for at least 10 more kids on this porch. I'm going to give you an opportunity to share in this business venture of mine. Business venture, I asked, not knowing what he meant. What business venture? You didn't think I'd let these kids see the digging of the first cesspool in Adamville for nothing, did you? He asked as if he'd insulted him. I charged them a penny apiece. You go round up 10 more kids. Tell them they not only get to see the digging of the first cesspool for a water closet for a penny, but also they will be served refreshments. Collect the money in advance. No credit or promises. How do you know Mama will give them a cookie? I asked. She has to, Tom said confidently, because she gave all the other kids a cookie. What do I get out of it? I asked. I knew from past experience that it always pays to spell out the terms of making a business deal with my brother. I'll pay you a commission of 1 penny for each 5 kids, Tom answered. If you round up 10 more kids, you will make 2 cents. How proud I was a half hour later as I marched 10 kids in our kitchen and told them to line up to receive one of Mama's delicious oatmeal cookies. Mama's attitude puzzled me. She didn't look pleased and proud as she had with Tom. I caught her giving me a funny look as she held the cookie jar and each kid helped himself to a cookie. I was at the end of the line and all set to have another cookie when Mama snapped the lid back on the jar. You had a cookie jar, D, she said. Please inform Tom, D. The cookie jar is empty. I wasn't prepared to serve cookies to every boy in town. I thought Mr. Harvey would be mad as all get out having 20 kids watching him. But as the afternoon wore on, he seemed to like playing to an audience, especially when he hit a big rock which he had to lift out of the hole. It was a heavy rock for one man to lift. All the kids applauded. Mr. Harvey looked at us and appeared to almost, but not quite, smile. When Mr. Harvey quit work that day, he told Mama to tell Papa that it would take 2 more days to finish the cesspool. Did you hear that, J.D.? Tom said, rubbing his hands together. I knew my great brain would make me a fortune someday. 20 kids tomorrow and 20 more the day after, that adds up to 40 cents. How about me? I asked, not wanting to be frozen out of this financial bonanza. I'm sorry, J.D., he said, patting my shoulder, but you know what Mama said about the cookie jar. That means I have to buy some ginger snaps myself to serve as refreshments. So I had to get a drink. I didn't realize reading would make my mouth so dry. Alright, so the next morning I went with Tom to Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institution, which was the name given to stores all over Utah, which were owned by the Mormon Church. There was one in every town, and you could buy anything from a penny stick of liquors to a plow and harrow in them. Most people simply call them the ZCMI store, although some Mormons did call them the co-op. Tom bought a 5-cent box of ginger snaps, which contained 20 cookies. Mr. Harvey played to a full house for the next 2 days. He finished digging a hole which was over 10 feet deep and about 10 feet across, and a trench 2 feet deep and about 1.5 feet wide that ran from the hole right under our house, where the bathroom was located. Then he brought a wagon load of cedar posts, which he used to line the lines of the cesspool, tying them together with baling wire. He also brought clay pipe, which he laid in the trench and filled with joints with mortar. Then he covered the cesspool with cedar posts and boards, over which he put 2 feet of dirt. He filled the trench with dirt, covering up the clay pipes just as the day's work finished. Mama must have felt a little guilty about not serving the kids cookie for those 2 days because she made lemonade for all the kids both days. Tom, of course, took all the credit, saying the lemonade was included in the price of admission. His great brain had made him a fortune in 3 days. The failure of the new inventions Papa ordered was always made all the more embarrassing because he bragged about them in advance. The water closet was no exception. Everybody in town knew about it long before it arrived. Nels Larson was a station master, ticket agent, telegrapher, express agent, and freight agent at the railroad depot. He never delivered any express or freight except the things Papa ordered. Mr. Larson would simply telephone people and tell them they had express or freight shipments at the depot and to come and get them. But his curiosity always got the best of him when anything came from Papa. When the water closet arrived, he went home and got his own team and wagon to make the delivery. He told his wife the water closet had come. Mrs. Larson got right on the telephone and spread the news all over town. By the time Mr. Larson had returned to the depot and loaded the crates containing the water closet, his wife had let everybody know that today was the day Mr. Larson was a middle-aged man with blonde hair and a light complexion. Today was the day. Mr. Larson was a middle-aged man with blonde hair and a light complexion stemming from his Swedish heritage. He always walked leaning forward as if walking into a strong wind and rode on the seat of his wagon the same way. He drove the team from the depot right down Main Street, with people leaving their places of businesses and homes to follow him. When he stopped in front of our house, There were about 200 men, women, and children in the street. Mama took one look out the bay window in the parlor and telephoned Papa at the advocate office. Mr. Larson was poised over a wooden crate with a hammer in his right hand, right in the middle of Main Street when Papa arrived. "What in the name of Juniper do you think you were doing?" Papa demanded. "Make the delivery in the rear." "Nothing in the rules fits. Says I've got to make deliveries in the rear," Mr. Larson said. "You don't have to open the crates right in the middle of Main Street," Papa said. "Rules and regulations say I've got to inspect the merchandise for damage," Mr. Larson said. "You know very well, Nels," Papa said testily. "The only time you ever inspect anything is when the shipment is for me." "Ain't nothing interesting in the others," Mr. Larson said. "Now you listen to me, Nels," Papa said, his dark eyes flaming with anger. "I will not permit you to make a spectacle of my water closet in the middle of Main Street." "And you listen to me, Fitz," Mr. Larson said, pointing his hammer at Papa. "It is my job to inspect the merchandise for damage, and that is just what I intend to do. Don't want you blaming the railroad or express company because this crazy contraption doesn't work." "What makes you so certain it won't work?" Papa asked, glaring at the station master. "None of those other newfangled inventions you ordered worked," Mr. Larson answered, putting Papa in his place. "Go ahead and open it," Papa said in complete defeat. The first crate Mr. Larson opened contained a copper-lined water tank, which he placed on exhibition on top of the crate. He stepped back and eyed it critically. "Can't figure out what that is for," he said. "Are you satisfied it isn't damaged?" Papa said, as if trying to control his temper. "If so, I assure you that Mr. Harvey and I will know what it is for." Then Papa folded his arms on his chest like a martyr. "Since you are bound and determined to hold a public unveiling of my water closet in the middle of Main Street, please get on with it." "No reason to get sore," Mr. Larson said indignantly, "just because a man is doing his job according to the rules and regulations." The next crate contained the big brass pipe that we later learned connected the water tank near the ceiling to the bowl on the floor. Mr. Larson held it up as if it were a spyglass. "You've been swindled again," he said to Papa as he laid the pipe down. Papa was positively fuming as Mr. Larson opened the next crate, which contained a porcelain bowl. Mr. Larson placed it like a trophy on top of the crate for all to see. "It is beginning to make sense," Mr. Larson had to admit. "But that bowl is plumb too big for kids." "Just determine if it is damaged and get on with it," Papa said. So angry he turned his back on Mr. Larson. It wasn't until the station master removed the wooden toilet seat that his skepticism began to vanish. He held it in front of his face as if it were a picture frame, as he slowly turned around for all to see. "This is the thingamabob you sit on," he asked, as if making a great discovery. There were many oohs and ahs from the crowd, who were used to sitting on boards with holes cut in them. Papa then sent me to fetch Mr. Harvey. I thought from the way Papa's jaws were puffed up that he would explode before I returned with the plumber, but he didn't. Mr. Harvey and I arrived just as the public unveiling of our water closet on Main Street came to a close. Mr. Harvey pushed Mr. Larson to one side and began searching through the crates until he found a big brown envelope containing the instructions for assembling the water closet. Then his and Papa's troubles began. Every man, woman, and child who could get their hands on any part of the water closet if it was being carried to our bathroom thought their help entitled them to remain and watch it being assembled. "Make everybody clear out of here," Mr. Harvey said to Papa as he plunked his tool case down on the bathroom floor. "Can't do a blooming thing with all these people hanging around in here." Papa asked everybody to leave. Nobody budged an inch until Papa promised they could all see the water closet and how it worked after it was assembled. He even made Swen, Tom, and me leave. The crowd broke up into small groups in our backyard and on our front lawn. They spoke in hushed whispers as people do at funerals. I wandered from group to group listening. The more I listened, the more humiliated I became. "Wouldn't want one of those things in my house," I heard Dave Teller, the shoemaker, telling a small group. "It is bound to stink up the whole house." Not only the house, Mr. Carter, who worked at the creamery, said, but the whole neighborhood if that cesspool caves in during a rainstorm. My friend Howard K. didn't help matters as he sidled up to me as if ashamed of being seen with me. Gosh, John, he whispered, folks are saying your pa has gone plumb loco putting a back house in your bathroom. He put his fingers to his nose. Woo, I'd hate to be living in your house. It was too much for me. I held back tears of humiliation until I'd run upstairs to the room I shared with Tom. I flung myself on the bed and began to cry. I'd always been proud of Papa in spite of him buying crazy inventions that didn't work. But this time he'd gone too far. He had done what Aunt Bertha said he would do. He had made us Fitzgerald the laughing stock of Adamville. Nobody would come to our house anymore. How could Mama entertain a ladies' sewing circle in a house that smelled like a back house? It would be the same as entertaining in her old back house. I visualized callers at our house stopping at the front gate and putting clothespins on their noses before entering our home. I don't know for how long I lay there crying with shame before I heard a terrifying clanging and banging as if somebody had dropped a lot of pans and kettles off of our roof. I dropped to my knees. I was positive the water closet had exploded. Please, God, spare my papa, I prayed. When I ran downstairs, I expected to find Mama hysterical with grief and Papa and Mr. Harvey blowing the kingdom come. Instead, I found Mama and Aunt Bertha in the kitchen making platters of sandwiches. I ran into the bathroom. Papa and Mr. Harvey were standing there looking at the installed water closet with smug expressions on their faces. The porcelain bowl was bolted to the floor in one corner of the room that had been partitioned off. The wooden seat had been attached to it. The water tank was fastened to the wall near the ceiling with a water pipe running up to it. The big brass pipe was connected to the water tank and the bowl. There was a brass chain attached to the water tank with a wooden handle on it. One more time to make sure, Papa said to Mr. Harvey. I watched Mr. Harvey pull on the chain. There was a clanging sound when the water rushed down the brass pipe from the water tank into the porcelain bowl, filling it up, and then suddenly the water in the bowl disappeared. She is ready and raring to go, Mr. Harvey said. For the first time in my life, I saw him smile. It was surely a miracle invention, but there was one thing I had to know. Will it stink? I asked. No, J.D., Papa answered. The water level in the bowl will keep any air or odor from coming up from the cesspool. I was so happy that it felt like doing a jig. As I followed Papa to the back porch, I watched Papa clasp his hands behind his back and teeter on his heels. Ladies and gentlemen, Papa announced to the crowd, I'm pleased to report that Mr. Harvey and I have successfully installed the first water closet in Adamville. You would be admitted in small groups of not more than 6 at a time. Mr. Harvey will explain the mechanism of the water closet and how it works. He will also give each group a demonstration. As you leave, please pass through the kitchen where Mrs. Fitzgerald will serve refreshments. I was lucky that I'd seen the water closet because none of the kids got a chance to see it. Grown-ups pushed the kids aside, including Tom and Swin. By the time all the grown-ups had seen the water closet, it was supper time. A howl of protest went up from the kids, but their parents made them go home. My brother Tom must have immediately put his great brain to work on how to capitalize on this, because the next morning he told me to follow him to the barn. Run down to the ZCMI store and get me a cardboard box, he said as he entered the barn. I'll need a piece of cardboard to make a sign. I was curious as all get out when I returned with a cardboard box that contained cans of condensed milk. I watched fascinated as Tom used his jackknife to cut out one side of the box. Then he laid the piece of cardboard on a bale of hay and took a package of crayons from his pocket. My admiration for his great brain turned to complete awe as I read the sign he printed on a piece of cardboard. I don't know if you can see that. See that right in the middle? Yeah. It says, see the magic water closet that doesn't stink. Admission 1 penny cash. No promises or credit. Tom then picked up a stick. After punching 2 holes in a piece of cardboard, he tied the sign to the stick with twine. Now, J.D., he said, I want to hire you to be a barker and make a pitch for my new business venture. Barker? I asked, not knowing what the word meant. And what is pitch? Remember last summer when Colonel Schaefer's medicine show came to town? Tom asked. I nodded. Remember how Colonel Schaefer stood on the tailgate of his medicine show wagon with the Indian he had with him beating on a tom-tom and the colonel making a speech? Well, I asked the colonel about it, and he told me that to attract the crowd, you have to have a barker and make a pitch. I want you to be the barker and make a pitch to attract a crowd of kids for my new business venture. What is in it for me? I asked. I'll give you 10% of the gross receipts, he answered. What are gross receipts? I asked. All the money we take in, Tom answered. You get 1 penny for every 10 pennies I collect. It's a deal, I said gratefully. Tom handed me the sign. Then he walked over and picked up the cowbell we put on our milk cow when we let her out to pasture. He handed the cowbell to me. We don't have a tom-tom like Colonel Schaefer's Indian, he said. Use the cowbell instead. His freckled face suddenly became solemn. Sometimes my great brain almost scares me, he said. I'll be a millionaire before I'm old enough to vote. Then his face broke into a grin. Off you go, J.D. Ring the bell and make your pitch on Main Street in front of our house. I took up my station as barker in front of our house. I rang the cowbell and made my pitch. See the magic water closet that doesn't stink, I shouted as I rang the cowbell. Only 1 penny to see the magic water closet. Colonel Schaefer was right. All you needed was a barker to make a pitch to attract a crowd. Kids came running from every part of town. I soon had kids lined up all the way from our front gate and around the side of our house to our back porch, where Tom was busily collecting a penny from each kid to see the water closet. My brother and I were on the verge of making a financial killing when I saw Mama come down Main Street. I knew she'd gone to spend the morning with Mrs. Taylor, who was ill. Here she was coming home, and it wasn't even 10 o'clock. I gave her a big smile as I rang the cowbell and made my pitch. See the magic water closet that doesn't stink, I shouted. Only 1 penny to see the magic water closet. John Dennis, come with me, Mama said sharply. I knew she was angry about something when she called me by my full name. She never called us boys by our full names unless she was angry with us. I followed her around the side of the house to the back porch. Tom flashed us both a triumphant grin as he collected pennies from the kids before admitting them to the bathroom. Tom Dennis, come into the kitchen, Mama said sternly. One thing I loved about Mama, when she was angry with us, she never scolded us out in front of other kids. Tom and I followed her into the kitchen. Aunt Bertha identified herself as the tattletale as we entered the kitchen. I thought it best to telephone you, Tina, she said. And it is a good thing you did, Mama said, placing her hands on her hips. Calling Tom and me by our full names was bad enough, but I knew Mama was just as angry as she could be when she placed her hands on her hips. Tom Dennis and John Dennis, I am thoroughly ashamed of you both. You should only be 10% ashamed of me, I defended myself. I'm just a barker and only get 10% of the gross receipts. To take part in anything that is wrong, even 1%, Mama reprimanded, is just as bad as 100%. Tom folded his arms in his chest. What is wrong with using my great brain to make money, he demanded. You heard your father say yesterday that everybody would be admitted to see the water closet, Mama said. I do not recall your father saying only adults would be admitted free and children would be charged a penny. Now hand me those crayons in your hip pocket. Tom reluctantly handed Mama the box of crayons. Then Mama took the sign away from me. I was horrified when she used a red crayon to draw a line through the words 1 penny and printed the word free instead on the sign. Then she handed the sign back to me. Now, John Dennis, she said to me, let me see you put the same amount of enthusiasm into your barking, as you call it, and ringing the cowbell as you were putting it into a few minutes ago. Papa isn't going to like this one bit, Tom said. Papa said it is brains that count and not muscles. When he finds out you made me give up a good money-making scheme my great brain thought up, he's going to be mighty angry with you, Mama. You just wait and see. When your father comes home, Mama said, not in the least cowed by Tom's threats, I'll have him explain to you the difference between an honest business transaction and swindling your friends. And now that I think of it, You must have charged admission for letting your friends watch Mr. Harvey dig the cesspool. Papa didn't say anything about letting everybody watch Mr. Harvey dig the cesspool for nothing, Tom said. And then all the customers were completely satisfied. Your customers are going to be more than satisfied, Mama said. Now just march yourself out to the back porch and refund not only all the pennies you collected this morning, but also all the money you collected for letting your friends watch Mr. Harvey dig the cesspool. But Mama, Tom started to protest. You heard me, Tom Dennis, Mama said, interrupting him. Tom didn't have to wait until Papa came home to learn the difference between an honest business transaction and a swindle. He refunded all the pennies he collected for letting kids watch Mr. Harvey dig the cesspool and see the magic water closet, and there were still 20 kids in line waiting for refunds. I followed Tom into the kitchen. Mama, he said indignantly, there were a bunch of cheaters out there. I refunded all the money I collected, and you know what, Mama? What, Mama asked. There are still 20 kids demanding refunds, Tom said with a wave of his hand toward the back porch. That will teach you a lesson, Mama said, if she enjoyed seeing her own flesh and blood defrauded. You would just have to take 20 cents out of your bank. Tom's cheeks swelled up in protest, but he knew there was no appeal from one of Mama's decisions. When the last kid had been paid off on the back porch, Tom put his hand on my shoulder. J.D., old partner, he said, we took a 20-cent loss on this business venture because some of those kids went back to the end of the line and got paid twice. There is no hurry in making good your half of the loss, but it's always best in business to settle these things immediately. We'll go get the 10 cents you owe me from your bank right now, partner. It didn't sound quite right to me. I needed some expert advice. I'm not handing over 10 cents unless Mama tells me to, I said. Tom put his arm around my shoulder. We've upset Mama enough for one day, he said. Let us settle this like businessmen and partners should. We don't have to run to Mama to settle a little thing like this. I guess I would have handed over my 10 cents of the loss if Mama hadn't been in the kitchen when we entered it to group upstairs to her room and get the money. I explained the whole deal to Mama and I asked her to settle it. John D. was only a 10% partner, Mama said to my joy. He is therefore only responsible for 10% of the loss. Tom didn't take the decision lying down. But you said anything that was 1% was just the same as 100%. That makes J.D. a full partner. Mama wasn't swayed by Tom's brilliant defense. I was speaking of morals, she said. Morally, John D. is guilty as you. But looking at it from a business angle, you would have pocketed 90% of the profits if Aunt Bertha hadn't phoned me. That makes you responsible for 90% of the loss. Tom knew the decision was final. All right, J.D. said, I'll settle for 2 cents. Just one moment, boys, Mama said. John D. gave you back the 2 cents commission you paid him. He wasn't your partner when Mr. Harvey was digging the cesspool. He was working for you on a straight commission. That makes you 2 even. It was the first time that my brother's great brain had cost him money. I was positive Tom would carry the scar of this financial catastrophe to his grave. That's the end of chapter 1. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'll do chapter 2 maybe another day.